Hey, by the end of this video, you are going to know exactly how to book appointments on your GoHighLevel calendar using VAPI or the Voice API. Now, I've made videos similar to this in the past using AI agents and other workflows that may have had a different configuration. But since refining this and also listening to people in the community and common issues that they have been having, I've decided to remake this video to show you exactly how we do it now. Not to mention, VAPI has changed their interface since my last video, so I figured it was time to update this. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Justin, and I like to create videos just like this, showing you in painstaking detail exactly how I solve technical problems in my business. Now, everything we cover today, to include the N8N scenario, and if there's any like prompts or if I can export the agent, I will include these as handouts inside of my free school community automation station. You can hop in there, download the JSONs, import it so you can follow along. Lastly, if you're new to this channel and you are not yet subscribed, I ask you to click subscribe down below. Recently, I've been going over my analytics and I realized that the majority of you are not subscribed. You're watching the video, you're downloading the JSON, you're joining the school community, and you're still not subscribed. I ask you that you go ahead and subscribe. It helps me, it helps the channel. And that's enough of that. So first thing I want to do is hop in. So there are two main things we're going to cover here. And it's really the two fundamental components to appointment booking using Voice AI, and that is querying the calendar for open slots to make sure there's availability and actually booking the appointment. I'm going to do my best to simplify this so that you can apply it in your business, not just watch me do this one thing. I want you to be able to copy and paste this and implement it in your business, or maybe you're an agency and you want to deploy this for a client. Before we get into the technicals, I do want to go over some common issues that I've been seeing. As I mentioned, I run a school community and I engage with that community every few weeks. As a matter of fact, every day, every few weeks we hop on a call, but every day I'm reading posts and helping people troubleshoot issues they're having with their workflows and helping them solve problems. And I keep hearing these recurring themes. And one of them is they're failing authentication. And most people don't know that this is happening, but essentially whenever we authenticate, and we're going to run through the complete authentication scenario here together, but it is very case sensitive. So what do I mean by case sensitive? Just like your password. If I say you need to type in authorization with a capital A, you have to type in authorization with a capital A. If that A is lowercase, then it will mess up the authentication. Also, people mess up the API key. And the most common reason why people mess up the API key is they copy and paste it into a Word document or a Google Doc, and Google Doc auto-corrects that first letter and makes it capitalized. That will also mess it up. And so I just want to emphasize how important it is to not add extra spaces. If there's a capital letter, leave it capital. And yeah, that's very frustrating. If you can't authenticate, you won't be able to do anything inside of GoHighLevel. And this will make a lot more sense. If you have no clue what I'm talking about, just keep watching. You'll see when this comes into play and I will remind you. Second thing is people cannot find the contact ID inside of GoHighLevel. So whenever they are triggering the voice agent to book an appointment, one of the required fields is the contact ID. And if you don't already have that contact ID, your workflow needs to have functionality to go look for that contact ID in order to book the appointment associated with that contact. Makes total sense. But depending on whether it's an inbound call or an outbound call, you may or may not have that contact ID already located in the message that gets sent to your workflow, your N8N workflow. And so I'm going to solve for that as well in this workflow. Some of the tutorials that I've made in the past are business problems that I solve for myself. And so I might make a tutorial that's outbound specific or inbound specific, and then maybe people try to change it or apply it in their own business, which they should. And that workflow as I built it wasn't accounting for outbound or wasn't accounting for inbound. And so I see a lot of issues where the data that they're referencing inside of their workflow is not located in the same place. And I know a lot of this, if you're seeing this for the first time, you're like, what is this guy talking about? Don't worry, you're going to see what I mean whenever we start catching these webhooks and start dragging and dropping value so that we can actually make VAPI talk to GoHighLevel. It'll make more sense. And the last thing is we're running into issues where N8N was false reporting success, or it was sending a message back to VAPI and VAPI was thinking that was a successful booking because I got a message back and it didn't necessarily say failure. And so I refine that a little bit more in this video. So whether you're new to the channel or you've been watching before and you're like, hey, this is redundant, I would continue to watch this because I've made some significant changes after iterating, after deploying this multiple times for other clients. I've seen what works, I've seen what doesn't, I see where the system breaks down, and so I'm trying to improve it. This may not be the last video I make. There may be another one that comes out after this in which the next version is a little bit better. Another thing I want to do is, and I promise this is the last of the talking, and then we'll go into the actual technicals, but I want to remove AI from the workflow. And that sounds counterintuitive, right? Because like we're using like a voice AI agent, aren't we? But yes, we're using a voice AI agent inside of VAPI, the voice API, but I don't necessarily want AI nodes inside of my workflow. And so if you look in here, there are no AI nodes. And something I've noticed inside of many content creators' instructions or other workflows that are floating around there is they use AI inside of it to essentially like format data. So they get information from the voice API or whatever provider you're asking for the information from. Then they bring it into the N8N workflow, and then they use AI to reformat that data so that it's in the correct form for the API call. That's all fine and dandy. And if that's the only way you know how to do it, that's okay. The problem with that is it costs money, right? Every time you reach out to OpenAI or you use one of those OpenAI nodes, you're spending money. Maybe it's a few pennies. It'll add up over time. Not only that, it can be unpredictable because it relies on prompting. It relies heavily on prompting. And not only prompting, but your style of prompting and what model you're prompting. And that changes. And we don't control the models. OpenAI releases new models. They deprecate old models. You have no control. So as far as scalability goes and repeatability, I question if AI nodes inside of workflows, especially when they're not necessary, if they're the best way to go. I don't think so. And then also it increases delay. So latency. Human conversations are pretty dynamic, and if you and I are having a conversation, I would respond in a manner that is timely, and I won't have unnatural pauses. But whenever you are calling a tool, you add some delay into that conversation, which is understandable, and the assistant will say, give me 1 second while I go do XYZ. But the longer that white space exists, then it just introduces opportunity for the conversation to go down weird directions where the caller might wonder, hey, are you still there? And then all of a sudden it's like waiting for feedback and people start stepping on each other. And so we just want to reduce the amount of time that it takes for that workflow to execute so that we can get the customer off the phone and get them what they need. And without further ado, let's hop right into it. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to come into VAPI. And if you're new to VAPI, VAPI is essentially a voice AI agent platform where you can build voice agents to answer the phone for you or make calls. In this case, I have a very simple agent here. And if you notice, my prompt is very minimal. And that's because we're just creating a prompt to test some functionality. And so we'll go through it really fast. One thing I want to highlight is this first section where you see it looks like unintelligible writing. And all this is essentially feeding the current time into the prompt. And the reason we do this is because AI isn't really good at telling time. If you didn't have this in the prompt and you asked the AI agent to essentially, hey, tell me when the person wants to book a call, then it will just pick a year out of thin air. It'll maybe pick a month out of thin air. And you don't want that. You want it to be relative to current time. And so I didn't make this up. If we come into the documentation for VAPI, you notice that there is a set of standard variables that they provide for you. And variables are just these values inside of the squiggly brackets. So you have double squiggly brackets here, and you have this variable called now, and that's the current date and time at the time that call is occurring in UTC, so universal time, or Zulu time. And that's fine and dandy. However, I don't live in Zulu time. I don't tell my time in Zulu time. I don't live in a location that's in that time zone. And so I live on the Eastern Standard Time Zone. And so all I did was copy this example that they laid out for me here. If you were in a different time zone, you can just replace your time zone. And you'll see further down in the tutorial, we're actually going to account for the caller's time zone. But for right now, I want the agent to know, hey, this is a company that's out of Georgia, which is in the Eastern Standard Time Zone. And so I want to be passing that value into the prompt. And so that's all I did here, was I just pasted that here. Now, pretty simple prompt. You're an appointment setting agent. Your goal is to book an appointment, mandatory information. Maybe I'll say name and time zone, because we're going to account for that later. And then I just described the tools that we're going to create. We're going to create these together so you can see exactly how I create them. And then just some rules to improve the quality of the conversation. Not super important to understand this just now. I'll copy and paste this prompt if you want to use it, but really this prompt is not the focus of this video. So next thing I want to do is create tools. So if I come in here to tools, you notice I have 0 tools inside of my VAPI dashboard. And so we're going to start from scratch. And the first thing I want to do actually before I create the tool is I'm going to come into N8N and I have a blank workflow and I'm going to add a trigger, which is a webhook. And the only thing I'm going to change for now is the method. I'm going to change this to post. Later on, we're going to change the response here, but I just want to copy this address here by clicking on it and come back in here and let's create our first tool, which is a function. And I'm going to name this function get open slots. This name is arbitrary. It doesn't matter what you name it. You notice I'm using like no spaces in this camel case where it's like lowercase, uppercase, lowercase. Personal preference, I just recommend that you stay consistent in everything that you do. And that's just the way I've been building tools in the past. So I'm going to stay consistent. Description, this tool is used to query the calendar for open/available slots. Okay, just a brief description. You can get more descriptive in here if you'd like, or through your testing, if you notice that something's not working or this tool isn't being triggered at the right time, you can be more descriptive and increase your chances of this tool getting called at the right time. Options here for asynchronous and strict, we're going to leave these as default. We don't need them. And then I'm just going to come over here and paste my server URL, which was the webhook URL we copied from N8N. I'm going to paste it just as it exists right here. And parameters, I'm going to add some properties here. And what these are is essentially a standard set of data in a standard format that's going to get sent from VAPI to N8N in order for you to process it. So in this case, we're going to ask for open slots. So there's some information like the caller's name that I might want to have, or the requested appointment time, or the caller's time zone that I might want to have. And so we're going to add those properties. And so let's add name first. And we'll say name of the caller is the description. We'll leave it as a string. I'm not going to leave this, or I'm not going to mark this as required because this is just to get open slots. I don't necessarily need the name. It's probably going to ask for the name anyway because inside of the voice AI agent main prompt, I said required information was name and time zone. It's probably going to ask for it anyway, but if it's in there, pass it to us. Let's add another property and let's say caller time zone. And it's going to be a string. And what I want to do here is say, give me the time zone of the caller. And I want it in a specific format. And I had ChatGPT up here earlier. And so I'm just going to reference my past chat. But you see here, I want it in this format, America, New York. I'm actually not even going to use it for now, but I just want it there just in case. And if I'm working with another platform, maybe it's not GoHighLevel, maybe it's like cow.com or something, and this time zone becomes useful, I just want to have it. Because remember, we're wanting to build these tools so that they scale across different platforms. And maybe you're an agency and you're building this for different users that use different CRMs. Just a good idea to have the time zone. And I want it in this format. So I'm just going to copy the name of this format and come back into VAPI and say, give me the time zone of the caller in the IANA time zone database standard format. And I'm even going to include an example. For example, if the caller is in EST, this value should be America, New York. Cool. So I am actually going to mark this as a required field and click save. And if we come over here, we have caller time zone. The last property we need is requested appointment. So the requested appointment time. And in the description here, what I'm going to write is essentially I want the requested appointment time already pre-formatted in the format that I need it. Because we're using VAPI and VAPI is powered by AI, I can leverage ChatGPT or OpenAI's GPT-4o model to do the formatting for me right here in VAPI, and I don't have to take it unformatted to N8N, and then try to manipulate the data there. Let me just work smarter and have VAPI do it for me. So I will say the requested date and time of the appointment, and I could say in ISO 8601 format, and you'll see what that format is here in a second as I provide examples. ISO 8601 format in the caller's time zone. It's probably not the best English there, and maybe we'll refine it with ⵛＨGPT here in a second, but let me give it an example. So I can say, example, if the caller requests an appointment for tomorrow at 2 p.m., and today is 11 April 2025, then the requested should be, and I'm just going to copy this because I had this in a conversation earlier, and the requested appointment time should be that. And I'll put that in quotes just so I'm being very explicit. And I want to give another example because this is just to get open slots. There's probably a scenario where somebody says, I don't know, what's your soonest available slot? So I'll give it another example. If caller does not provide a requested / preferred appointment date and or time, then pass the current date at midnight. For example, if today is 11 April 2025, then the value should be, and I'm just going to change these hours to midnight. Instead of 1400, it'll be midnight. Cool. We can probably add one more example to say if all they have is a preferred date. I'm going to pass this through AI to make this more concise, but let's see, if all they have is a preferred date, then set the requested appointment to the date at midnight. For example, if they say Saturday and today is Friday, 11 April, and the value should be, and it's going to be the same as this because the 12th just so happens to be Saturday. So what I'm going to do here is, and I'm running you through this painstaking process of you watching me type, but I think it's helpful for you because this is exactly how I develop my own prompts and descriptions. And so what I'll do here is I'll just copy this and I'll send it into GoHighLevel, to ｃhatGPT, and say, help me refine this VAPI tool or function parameter description for requested appointment. And I'm going to paste it. I want to make this more concise or to improve reliability and performance of the function. And it should print out a more concise description. So let's see what it came up with. The requested appointment time in ISO 8601 format in the caller's time zone, and then it's simplified the rules here. Perfect. Awesome. So I'm just going to copy that. I think that looks better. We'll test it here in a second. And what I want to do is make this a required field and click save. Now, all the hard work is done because, spoiler alert, for the book appointment, I'm going to use these same parameters for the book appointment. And so I'm going to show you a shortcut on how we can do that. But here, just to recap, we made a function, we gave it a brief description, we gave it some parameters, and then we also set the address of our webhook. And so I'm just going to make sure that's saved. And what I want to do is test this. And so I'm going to come over here to our webhook and I'm going to make sure it's listening. So I'm just going to click listen, and we're going to make a call and request open slots to see if it calls our webhook, and then we're going to start to build out the workflow from there. So let me come into assistance and let's come into here, and I'm going to call this assistant.
Cut and get tool. 2 lead 6 28 DC 11 F1 F6 D4.
All right, so it gave me an error, probably because I was testing here, and you notice I have an old tool, so I'm just going to clear that out. And as a matter of fact, that reminds me, I need to actually assign the tool that we created. So we created the Get Open Slots tool. I need to make that available to the assistant before we actually give it a call. So let's try that again.
Hello, how can I help you today?
Hey, my name is Justin, and I'd like to see if you have any open slots for tomorrow.
Hold on a sec. Hold on a sec.
All right, cool. So I noticed my little emblem switched here, so I saw that the webhook actually was posted. And so here we have the name, we have the time zone, and it just came up with the time zone because it didn't ask me that. I don't know how it knows what time zone I was in, but we could refine the prompt if we really wanted to. Again, we're not going to use caller time zone inside of this workflow, but if that was important to you, then I would recommend going into the main prompt of the assistant and being very clear on what information is required. But it passed it to us, and then it gave us the date and time, and it looks accurate, 2025-04-12, which is tomorrow, that's Saturday, and it gave it to us at midnight because I didn't tell it what time I wanted to book an appointment. So what we're going to do is pin this data up here because we're going to work with this data as we're building out our workflow. At this point, we want to change this response over here to respond with webhook node using respond to webhook node because we want to be able to pass information back to VAPI whenever we're done executing the function. And so let's go ahead and click out of here. I'm going to save. And the first thing I want to do here is I'm actually going to create a node called set variables. And the reason I do this is because I want to be able to hand this over to you and you can replace it with your information. And also if you're building this out for your clients, you can easily replace stuff like the location ID and the calendar ID of your client in this one node. So I'm going to name this set variables and rename. And in here, I'm going to create two variables. Actually, I'm going to create three. Location ID, I'm going to create calendar ID, and then I'm going to create contact ID because we might feed in a contact ID in the future. But for location ID, I'm going to come into my sub account. And so I'm here in a demo sub account. So if I come here to settings and click on business profile, you'll see your location ID here. So I'll just click on it to copy it. And then the next thing I need is a calendar ID. So if I come into calendars and I'm just going to pick a demo calendar here up top and copy that and paste it in. I set the location ID and the calendar ID. Now for contact ID, I'm not going to set anything right now. There are times where maybe you triggered an outbound call and you passed the contact ID as an assistant override, but in this case we didn't. And so I'm just going to leave it empty for now, which is going to serve the purpose anyway, because we're just going to account for the worst case scenario. And that is that the contact ID doesn't exist and we need to find it. But for this first part here, we're just going to get open slots. And so we don't necessarily need a contact ID for get open slots. We just need a calendar ID and a location ID and the start and end time. And so next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a module called a switch node. And the reason I'm using this module called the switch node is because I'm going to use this same webhook to get open slots and book an appointment. So I need the ability to switch the direction of where this workflow is going depending on which tool got called. And I'm going to show you how to do that here. So I'm going to click on switch node, and the first rule here is, let's say, get open slots. And I'm actually going to test this workflow really fast so that I can pass information over to the switch node. There you go. We have this information now available to the switch node. So I'm going to collapse this, collapse the headers. And if we look at the tool call function name right here, this is essentially what we want to test. So I'm actually going to remove this. I'm going to drag and drop this name into the name side. And essentially I'm going to say, hey, if this value equals get open slots, then go down this path. And I'm going to name this path get open slots. Now, the second one, I'm going to sort of pre-position a route for my book appointment. So we haven't created the function yet, but I know that I'm going to create a function named book appointment. So I'm just going to add a routing rule. I can literally just copy this value and I can come in here and say is equal to book appointment. And this is case sensitive right here. So book appointment, you notice I have it in camel case. That does matter in this scenario because it's gonna compare the value that's in this little name section that we dragged and dropped here, and it's gonna check if it matches exactly book appointment. And we'll rename this to book appointment. Okay. So now you see we have two routes. We have the top one and the bottom one. And if we test this workflow, you should see this side actually green up. And so let's go ahead and test it. And it's hard to see here, but that line is green because we matched the first criteria in the switch function. So next thing we need to do is we actually need to format the date and time, the start time, and then we need to figure out an end time so we can query the GoHighLevel API for open slots. And so I'm going to show you what I mean by this. I'm going to pull over the API documentation over here, and let's check out the get open slots endpoint. Or it's probably get slots or something like that. There you go, get free slots. So if we look at get free slots, we need some information here. So we need the calendar ID, which we set in a variable, right? And we'll be able to drag and drop there, no problem. And then we need something that's pretty difficult to put together. So look here, we have a time zone, which is pretty cool because we actually pass that in, but we're not going to use time zone for now because we account for it in our date timestamp. But we have our start date and we have our end date. And so you see this number doesn't look like a normal date here, right? This is called epoch time in milliseconds. So we need to do some formatting here. This would be an opportunity where a lot of people use AI, me included, but we're going to try to get away from that so we can ensure that we have reliable and speedy workflows. So I'm going to come in here, and what I want to do is look for the date functions, and it says manipulate date and times. These are standard nodes that are provided with N8N. And let's see, we want to format a date. This is what we want to do. And I'm going to name this node start time. And the date we want to format is actually located inside of our webhook that came in here. We have this requested appointment parameter that we defined earlier. And so I'm going to paste that in there. And if we look at the format, we actually want format in Unix MS timestamp. So that's epoch time in milliseconds. So Unix time, epoch time, they're used synonymously. So I'm going to click that. And then the output, I want to output that as a value called start time. I should say start date. Let me look at the document. Yeah, let's just use start date just so that we're consistent, not start time. Awesome. So let's go ahead and test this step just to make sure it works. And if we look over here, there is the start date. And if I come into like epoch time converter and I paste this in here, you'll see that the date is April 12th at midnight, 8 a.m., right? Awesome. That's exactly what we wanted. Now, what I want to do when we get open slots, we're essentially going to get open slots for a 24-hour period. So I'm going to do some math. I'm actually going to use another date function that's included inside of N8N, and I am going to add a day to it. So let's search for date again and add to date. And so what we're actually going to do is we are going to use this start date, and we're going to add 1 day. So we're going to add, the unit is days. We're going to add 1, and then we'll name this, we can keep it at new date for now. So I'm just going to name this node add a day, rename that, and let's go ahead and test it. And there goes your new date. You notice that it gave it to us in ISO 8601 format, which we need to go ahead and change it back to milliseconds because that's what the GoHighLevel API is expecting. No big deal. We've done it once. We can do it again. And so what we can actually do is come in here and look for date and then format a date. We'll name this one end date. And then I'm going to pass in this new date here, which is the 13th, which is a day after our original requested appointment. And the format is going to be Unix MS timestamp. And we'll name this end date. And let's go ahead and test this. I don't think I renamed this end date. Let's test that. Cool. So now we have the end date in epoch time in milliseconds, and we also have the start date in epoch time in milliseconds. So now we can actually do the API query, but there's one more thing that we need. So if we come in here to the API documentation, you realize that we need to get a API token so we can authenticate to the GoHighLevel API. And so we're going to go into our sub account here, and I'm still in the settings section, and I'm going to scroll down to private integrations. Let's go ahead and create new integration. I will name this N8N YouTube. And we need to define the scope. So we're doing calendar actions, we're doing contact actions. So if we search for contact here, we need to be able to view contacts. We need to be able to edit contacts because we might actually create new contacts. And then we're doing stuff with the calendar. So if I search calendars, we need to view calendars. We need to edit calendars. We need to view events, edit events, and I don't think we need to do anything with calendar groups. I think that'll be enough here. These are just permissions that are assigned to the key that you're about to create. And if you mess up these permissions, you can modify them. So it's not that big a deal. But this next step, very important you pay attention. I'm going to click create, and then I'm going to be presented with an API key. Do not share this key like I'm sharing with you. I'll delete this after this video, but this is a private key that gives access to your GoHighLevel sub account. So you don't want to share that. Now, this, as soon as I click X on here, it'll disappear and I'll never be able to see it again. I can create a new one if I wanted to, but just go ahead and copy this and let's go ahead and add our credential. So if I come into the workflow here, I'm going to add a new node and it's going to be an HTTP request. And in here, I'm just going to go straight to the authentication section. I'm going to use a generic credential type, header authentication. And then what I want to do is create a new credential and we'll name it N8N YouTube GHL. It doesn't matter what you name this so long as you can identify it. And here is where case sensitivity becomes very important. And a lot of you have messed this up. So pay attention here. Okay. Authorization. It's important. It's a capital A. There's no spaces before it or after it. That's all you need in the name section. And it needs to be spelled correctly. And then in the value section, what I want you to do is click on expression here so you could see what you're typing. Because if you don't click expression, you can't see what you're typing. It looks like a password. So we're going to click expression so we could see what we're typing. And then I'm going to type in the word bearer with a capital B, B-E-A-R-E-R. Space, only one space. Paste that key exactly how we copied it from that previous screen. No spaces after, but one space before. Capital B spelled B-E-A-R-E-R. Tough word, but that's all we need to do. Let's click save. And now we have our credential created. I'm going to come back into this screen and click X. And there you go. Our key is created. We can now authenticate and actually execute this API call. So let's go ahead and let's build it. So this is a GET request. You see this in this green box. And then here is what's called the endpoint. So I'm just going to copy that endpoint, come into here, and this is a GET request. And I'm going to paste the URL right here. But we have this little variable here, calendar ID. We need to fill that in with the actual calendar ID. And so how do I do that? What I'm going to do is switch this to expression. I'm going to pop this open so we have more room to work. And I'm going to remove this little calendar ID placeholder, and I will actually go here to where I set the variables and just drag and drop my calendar ID in between these two forward slashes. And that will automatically fill the calendar ID that I used inside of set variables. I can go ahead and close this now. While I'm at it, I'm going to rename this to get open slots. And the credential, we already set it because we did that just now. And then we need to build the actual API call. So if I come into here, you notice we have path parameters, which is the calendar ID. We just satisfied that. And now we have what are called query parameters. And we need to pass in the two required query parameters, which is the start date and the end date. Luckily, we already formatted that. And so we can just pass that in. So I'm going to turn on send query parameters. And the first one is start date. Best practices, come over here and copy that because case actually matters here as well. And the value is actually going to be this start date. So I'm just going to drag and drop it. And the start date is already properly formatted. Now we're going to add another value, which is end date. I'm going to copy and paste this exactly as it appears. And the value is going to be end date. Now I'm going to show you something here. Don't let this confuse you. I can drag and drop end date here, okay? But you notice that the start date has this weird $sign and then start time in the name of the variable, and this one just says $JSON. Both will do the same thing. However, if I ever move this get open slots node to another position in the workflow, this will break. And so I don't think it's best practice to use the $JSON. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this $JSON, and I'm just going to click $sign again, and then scroll down to where it says end date. I'm going to press enter there, .item, .json, and .end date. And it's the same value, But now if I ever move this node from its current position to somewhere else and the end date wasn't the node right before it, then this node is still going to work. If that confused you, don't worry about it. For the purposes of this video, if you left it at JSON, it's still going to work. Okay. Next thing we need to do, we knocked out our query parameters. Now we need to knock out our headers. So we already did authorization because we included that in the credentials, but there is this version header that we need to pass in. And so I'm going to copy this. Notice version has a capital V, very important. And so I'm going to come into headers, send headers, and name is version with a capital V. And then I will just paste in that date that was provided inside of the API documentation. So once I do that, I should be able to test this step and it should give me open slots. Let's see. There you go, it worked. So it provided me with all these open slots. So now what we need to do is actually give these open slots back to GoHighLevel. I'm sorry, to VAPI. And so before I do that, I actually want, let's see. I want to account for, because sometimes what I've noticed is that even if there were no open slots, like for example, if we change the date, I'm gonna mess with the date really fast, because if we change the date to where there wasn't open slots, it would still return as if it was successful, and that's an opportunity for VAPI to give us a false positive. So I'm gonna copy this really fast, and let's delete this, and I'm just gonna paste this in here, and I'm gonna change this 7 to a 6 because that's in the past, and I'll do the same thing over here. This is just an example. You don't have to follow me here. I just want to show an example. Hopefully it works out. So if I test this step, you realize that I still got a green check mark here, and it's like the API call happened even though it didn't really happen. And it's one of those opportunities for false positive, but it just has trace ID and really no open slots. So instead of passing this to VAPI and it potentially getting confused, I want to make sure that we split it up and determine if it was successful or not in grabbing open slots. And let's see if I can Control Z here. Yeah, thank God I can. Cool. And so I'm going to go ahead and test this step to make sure it still works. Cool. We have our open slots. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create an if statement. And forgive me for getting a little bit advanced here, but this will ensure that your voice agent is more accurate. So if you come in here, what I want to do is I actually want to come in here and say $ get open slots dot, let's see, can I do keys dot item dot JSON dot keys length. So essentially it's counting the amount of items that are inside of the response. And we have an item right here, 2025-04-12, that's one key. We have 2025-04-13, that's another key, and trace ID is the third key. And so if you notice, the length here is 3. So whenever it's successful, it's going to be greater than 1, because when it wasn't successful, these dates weren't there and it was just a trace ID. So what I'll do is I'll say, hey, if the length of the keys is greater than 1, then it's set to true. So go down the true path. This is a little bit advanced. If you want to remove this step, you can, but I don't recommend you do, because you want to make sure that the VAPI assistant gets accurate information. So let's go ahead and test this workflow all the way through. And it looks like it was true because the response from get open slots was more than 3 keys. Okay. And now what we want to do is report success. So we just respond to webhook and we'll say success, get open slots. And then we're actually going to respond with JSON. And I have some notes over here that I'm just going to copy and paste. And I am going to pop this open. Actually, I'm going to switch to expression first. I'm going to pop this open. And what I want to do is come in here and I'm going to, this format is important. So you want this result to be passed back. That's what VAPI is expecting on the way back. As a matter of fact, I think, yeah, VAPI should be expecting that. I'm just checking my notes here. Results, tool call ID. Yeah. So VAPI is actually expecting a different format, and that is the format. Apologize for that. So we have results. We need the tool call ID, which is actually already pre-populated here. Again, you can download this whole thing, but if I come in and check out my webhook that was sent in initially, you'll see the tool call and then the tool call ID, which is listed right here. And then the result here, I'm going to go ahead and delete this successful booking here. This was just an example, and I'm going to delete the quotes. And instead, what we're going to pass in is the results of the API query. So if I just do double squiggly brackets and a $, I want the get open slots dot, and then I'm going to use a built-in function called, oh, actually it's item.JSON, and then it's to JSON string. And so that's going to essentially pass that back to the VAPI assistant. And now the VAPI assistant will have access to all the open slots inside of our GoHighLevel calendar. And now if it was unsuccessful, I'm just going to copy this and paste it by using Control-C and Control-V and connect the unsuccessful. And then I'm going to rename this to unsuccessful. And now instead of passing over the result, what I'm just going to say is, in quotes, I'm going to say unable to retrieve open slots, try another day. Time. Cool. So we're just passing a message back to VAPI. So if I go ahead and test this now, we should be able to ask for an appointment tomorrow at 2, and VAPI should be able to provide us with some options. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to unpin this data. I'm going to save this workflow because we've done a lot of work up to this point, and I will test this so that our webhook is listening. And I'm going to go ahead and do another test call to our voice assistant.
Hello, how can I help you today?
Hey, my name is Justin, and I'd like to book an appointment for tomorrow. Do you guys have any open slots?
This will just take a sec. I have several open slots for tomorrow. Here are some options. 8 a.m., 8:30 a.m., 9 a.m., 9:30 a.m.
Awesome. Now, there's a little issue with the prompt because I only wanted to suggest 2 open slots, but I'm not going to focus on the prompt here. But it got the open slots, okay? And so if I told it, for example, let's do a call again and tell it a date that was in the past. Let's see if we can trip it up a little bit.
Hello, how can I help you today?
Hey, do you have any open slots for April 10th?
Hold on a sec. It seems there are no open slots for April 10th.
So that's interesting. So the reason why we test is you see that it actually didn't go down the route that we thought, and let's see why. So if we come over here for April 10th, oh, the reason why that happened was because we added a day, right? And I just happened to ask for April 10th. Very important that we do this testing because now we see the behavior. We added a day, so there's actually slots on April 11th because that's part of our time range that we fed it. Now I'm going to call back one more time just so we can test the false path, and I'm going to give it a date of, I don't know, April 8th, and let's see what happens. So let's go ahead and test this workflow again, and let me originate a call.
Hello, how can I help you?
Hey, my name is Justin, and I was calling to see if you guys have any appointments for April 8th.
One moment. It looks like there are no available appointments for April 8th. Would you like to choose a different date or time? I can also check for...
Perfect. That worked exactly as we wanted it to work. So really good stuff. Now, next thing we need to do is book an appointment. And so let's go ahead and create the tool for booking appointments. So we'll come back in here to tools. And before we create the new one, what I want you to do is let's go ahead and switch this to JSON. This is just a little hack here. And we can literally Control-A or select all and copy this. And what we want to do is create a tool and create a new function. And we're going to name this book appointment. And then the description is going to be used to book an appointment on the calendar. I misspelled that. And then we're going to leave the options as default. And then now, instead of creating the parameters, we just want the same parameters to be sent over instead of creating them from scratch. We're going to switch this visual editor to JSON. And I'm just going to delete everything here and paste what I had. And I can actually, let me zoom out a little bit and toggle this back to visual editor. Actually, hold on. Let's apply the changes first and then change this back to visual editor. And now you can see that they were created. So that's sped up our development time a little bit. And then now for the server settings, we just need to pop back in here and make sure we copy this webhook and paste it in there and save. Last thing we need to do is make sure that our assistant has access to the tool that we just created and publish. So now we should actually be able to book an appointment. So I'm going to call and at request to book an appointment, and then it should send the webhook and come down this side of the workflow, and we'll build out this side together. So let me go ahead and test workflow so that it's up and listening, and let's originate another call.
Hello, how can I help you today?
Hey, my name is Justin, and I'd like to book a call for tomorrow at 2.
One moment. It looks like the slot for tomorrow at 2 is already booked. However, I can offer you 2 available slots nearby. Tomorrow at 2:30 p.m.
Yeah, I'll take the tomorrow at 2:30 p.m., please. Can you book that?
Give me a moment. Hold on a sec. This'll just take a sec.
All right, so it's stuck in this loop and it continues to run our get open slots. So something's not going right. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to see, yeah, it kept running get open slots. So let's go ahead and see why that's happening. I probably just have to modify my prompt to be very explicit in saying, hey, whenever it's time to book an appointment, use the book appointment tool. And that's already in there. So let's see, tools. Book appointment. Awesome. I've also noticed, and this is where AI gets tricky. I notice I'm using the 4.0 mini cluster. For everything else I've ever built, I just use the 4.0 production cluster. So let's see if that makes any change. I'm not going to change anything else. I'm just going to change the model. And if this works, this is exactly why I don't like using AI in workflows, because there's enough variables as it is. So let's give it a shot with changing the LLM to 4.0.
Hello, how can I help you today?
Hey, my name's Justin, and I'd like to book a call for tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Give me a moment. This'll just take a sec. Your appointment has been successfully booked for tomorrow at 2 p.m. If you need any further assistance, feel free to ask.
Very interesting, because it actually didn't happen. So I'm not quite sure what's going on here. Let's go ahead and troubleshoot this, okay? So let's see what happens. So if we come into our execution history and I pop open our last execution, let's see what came in. So we actually got open slots, and I do expect it to try to get open slots first to make sure that appointment is available. And it looks like the appointment here is available. And so next it should actually try to book it. And so let's try one more time. Let's come in here. Let's see, use the book appointments tool to book appointments on the calendar. Let's say use the get open slots tool to make sure the appointment is available, and use the book appointments tool to book appointments on the calendar. Let me make sure there's nothing conflicting in the rules. If there are no available slots, cool. And we have our tools available. Let me just come over here and make sure the tools used to book appointments on the calendar. This says this tool is used to query for open slots. All right, yeah, let's give it another shot.
We are sorry. An application error has occurred. Goodbye.
Interesting. VAPI is screwing up today. Let's call it again.
Hello, how can I help you today?
Hey, I was calling because I'd like to book an appointment for tomorrow at 2.
Could I have your name to proceed with booking the appointment?
Justin.
Hold on a sec. Great news, Justin. The slot for tomorrow at 2 p.m. is available. Would you like me to book it for you?
Yes, please.
One moment. Your appointment for tomorrow at 2 p.m. has been...
All right, that actually worked as expected. As you can see, we modified the prompt just a bit. I'm not sure what happened when we called the first time. Again, this is all new technology. It can be buggy at times. But now what it did first was it checked to see if that appointment was available, which is exactly what I want to happen. And then it went down the book appointment path. So it's hard to see here, but we have this little line greened up because it sent the it used the book appointment function. And so what I want to do is I actually want to pin this data so that we can work with this to build out our next section. And now what I want to do is I'm going to start with an if statement. I want to check if the calendar ID exists. I'm sorry, not the calendar ID, the contact ID exists. And so what I'm going to do is search for an if statement here, and I'm going to name this contact ID exists. And let's see, if contact ID string exists, then proceed. So if we test this workflow, there's no contact ID. Maybe I should say string is not empty. There you go. It is empty. And so we're going to build out this false side first. And so what we're going to do is that if the contact ID is empty, then we actually need to find the contact ID. And the way we do that is by building a search query inside of GoHighLevel. And so what I'm going to do is literally just copy this node and paste it. And we're going to use this because it has some important information that we already need. And so let's pop this open and let's name this search contacts. And then I'm referencing some notes here so that we can be efficient. And this is going to be a post request. And then I'm just going to paste the endpoint here, which is a search endpoint. Our authentication is going to be the same, but this time we are sending different parameters. So we're not going to send query parameters. The header version is actually different, and that can be referenced inside the GoHighLevel documentation. I have notes here that I'm referencing. And now we're going to send a body. And the first parameter that we're sending is named query, and we're actually going to search for the contact by the phone number they're calling from. So if we scroll down here to the webhook, we should be able to find what phone number the caller is calling from, available inside of all this data that is provided inside each of the webhooks. So it's, if I remember correctly, somewhere towards the bottom. So just keep looking for it. Right here. So customer number, we're just going to drag and drop that into the value. So we're going to search for the contact based on their phone number. So if I come down here, we have the query. Next thing we need to do is we need to provide the location ID. And we luckily have that already saved inside of our, not the switch module. I don't really want it from the switch module, even though that'll work. I want it from the variables module. So I'll just go ahead and drag location ID. And the last thing we need is a value called page limit. And so page limit, and this is actually going to be a 1. And cool. So if I test this, I should actually find the contact. And something's wrong. So it says unprocessable entity. Let's see. Trace ID, status code 422. Let's make sure that our credentials correct. We have our post method, location ID, we have page limit. Let me try something here. Make sure this is being passed as a number and not a string. And let's try to search there. There you go. Okay. I just needed to pass the page limit as a number. It was being passed as a string. So the way you do that is squiggly brackets, capital N number, in parentheses, the number 1. Okay. You notice that there are 0 returns, and that is expected because if I come into contacts, I have 0 contacts here in this demo account. And so let's go ahead and go down the false route. And so we need to create another conditional statement here to see, hey, if it returns 0, we can create another if here and say, did we find the contact? Or I should just be more concise, contact found. And I was actually inconsistent in my naming of this one. I should say, I should do camel case, contact ID exists. Cool. And let's come back here and look at the totals. So we're going to say, hey, if the total is number greater than 0, then go down to true, but this is 0, so it should go down to false. So if I test it, our false branch has 1 item, which is what we expected because the contact doesn't exist. And now we're just going to create the contact. And so I'm going to copy this and paste this because we need a contact ID in order to book an appointment. So let's go ahead and rename this create contact. And then I'm referencing my notes here. This is a post request. The endpoint is a little bit different. So I'm just going to copy and paste service.leadconnectorhq.com/contacts. And the version is actually the same for this endpoint, but our JSON is going to be a little bit different. So we're actually going to, let's go ahead and turn this off and turn it back on. So we just clear it out. And the parameter we're going to send is phone. If you have any questions on these API calls, it is all available in the API documentation here inside of GoHighLevel. So if I look at create contact, all this, I just already pre-built it in my notes, but it's all available in here. So we're just building based off this documentation. So we're going to pass over the phone number because that is going to be how we're going to create the contact right now. You can add name and all that. Matter of fact, we'll add name because we have the name available inside of the call, the tool call. And so let's go ahead and I'm going to pop this back open so I can copy the location of this phone number here. Copy that and let's go ahead under phone number and paste this. And it looks can't execute. Okay, so let's test this again because for some reason we can't access that value. But if we execute this again, we should be able to access it. Can't determine which item to use. Interesting. Why can't we? Let me try to drag and drop again, make sure the phone number is still accessible. Where are you at? So customer phone number. There it is. Can't determine which item to use. Execute node for more info. Okay, no worries. We'll just keep going and then we'll execute it later to make sure it all works whenever it's all built. So next thing we need is the location ID where we're building that contact. And we have the location ID available in our set variables. Cool. And what else? We said we're going to pass over the name, right? So let's go ahead and pass over name. Let me make sure name is valid. Name. Yep, name. And so we're just going to pass over the name that came over inside of the webhook call. And let's paste this name. And let's save this workflow. And what I want to do, because we're going to use the name, I actually want to make sure a name is always passed for this book appointment. So if I come into the book appointment tool, I'm going to pop open name and actually make this a required field. Because if the name isn't present, then it'll actually break the workflow. So let's come back in here and let's go ahead and test this workflow. So let's see what happens. Cool. So it looks like everything worked. So the search worked and it output nothing. And then it failed the test. It passed the test because that's what we wanted to happen. And then we come into create contacts and it looks like the contact was actually created. And here's the contact ID. If I go inside of GoHighLevel and just refresh, you'll see there is a contact for Justin and that is the phone number. Perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. Now, we're building out the failure scenario first, and that's where all the work is done. But so the success scenarios are going to be a whole lot easier. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to set the contact ID. And so if we come in here, let's see, we will type in a set node, and we're just going to set the contact ID. Okay. And then let's create a new field here, contact ID. And I just want to drag and drop the contact ID in here so that we can save it. If I want to make sure that I'm being extra careful, I can not use the JSON like I mentioned earlier, and I can actually come down here, search for create contact.item.json.contact. Should be ID. Boom. Same thing. Don't worry about it. If you don't get what I was doing there, you could just drag and drop like I did in the beginning. Don't let it confuse you. Cool. So now we set the contact ID. I'll just test that to make sure the contact ID gets set. And next, we just book the appointment. And so if I come in here, I'm just going to copy this API call and we'll modify it like we've been doing. We'll rename this book appointment. And let me reference my notes here, just so we can build this out faster. It's a post request, and we're just going to paste the event appointments endpoint. Authentication remains the same. The version is different, so I'm just going to replace this version with the version that's in the documentation. And now for the body, I'm actually going to reset it. And instead of using the fields below, I'm going to use JSON. There's actually no reason to use JSON. Let me see. Why did I use JSON in my notes? We don't need to. Let's go ahead. And we do need to use JSON, but we can do the body parameters just as we were before. So the first thing we need to pass in is the calendar ID. And we have that available in our variables that we set earlier. So we have calendar ID. We can just drag and drop it. We also need the location ID once again. So that's why I set variables early on, because if you were going to deploy this for another client and you didn't set those variables, you would have to change the calendar ID and the location ID in every single one of these nodes, and you're bound to mess something up. So instead, we just change it in one place and it changes it for all. Then next thing we need to provide is the contact ID. And so luckily we just set the contact ID in the last node. And remember, I don't like using this JSON here, so I'm going to change it to set contact ID .item.json .contact ID. There you go. And then we just need the start time, which we have inside of the webhook. And so start time, that's case sensitive, so you need to make sure you refer to it that way. And the start time was inside of our webhook, already pre-formatted, and there you go. So 1400. So if I test this, it should create an appointment. Let's see. Boom, we have an appointment ID. And so let's make sure inside of our GoHighLevel, there you go. There's the appointment. Perfect. So that works. Now, that is the success scenario, but we still need to account for responding to VAPI. And so I want to make sure that if it's a successful booking, we send it down the success path. And if it was unsuccessful, we say unsuccessful. So let's name this booking success. And what I want to see is the status code. And I didn't see a status code that got reported in here. But I guess what I can look at is appointment status confirmed. Because if it was confirmed, then, or maybe I could do status booked. So if I come in here and I check for status is equal to booked, then that means it was successful. Awesome. I can go crazy here and replace this JSON, but I'm not going to. It's an if statement. That if statement is always going to be right after the booking. But if I wanted to be diligent, I would change that. But for the sake of speed, we're going to go on. Let's save, and then let's test this. So if it was booked, it should go down the true path, which it did. And now we can respond to webhook with success booking. Rename that, and then I'm going to come in here and copy one of these just so that we have something to reference. Respond with JSON, and I'm going to paste that, make it an expression, pop it open, and for the result, I'm just going to say booking successful, just to give it a success message. And then let's go ahead and copy and paste this and make sure we have a unsuccessful booking response. Successful booking. And then let's just modify the message here to say unsuccessful booking, try a different day or time. Cool. Cool. I think that should do it. So let's save. Let's go ahead and test this workflow. So the interesting thing is that next time, if I test this again, I expect this condition to fail because the slot's already taken. And so that'll actually test something because it'll test our conditional. So let's go ahead and test the workflow again. So it actually failed before that because we actually have the contact available now because we created the contact earlier. So that's good. Now we can build out the true statement here because it searched contacts and it actually found my contact here. And so what I want to do here is essentially, if we do find the contact, I just want to set the contact ID. So I'll just come over here and let's rename this set contact ID found or something because we found the contact. And instead of this, we'll delete it and make sure we drag and drop from here. And so the contact ID was found and we set the contact ID. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drag this to the book appointment because there's no sense in making another book appointment node. We already have one, but there's one trick here. So in the contact ID, I actually don't, this is one example where I don't want to use the contact ID that was in the set contact ID, okay? Follow me here. Set contact ID actually refers to this guy. And if we actually found the contact ID, this was never used, this was used. And so instead, this is a scenario where we actually want to use the JSON format. So instead, what we can do is let's go ahead and delete contact ID, and we'll say JSON.contact ID. And the reason why it's not greening up right now is because we didn't execute this. So if I executed that right there, then if I pop this open, you'll see that it automatically filled. So now, no matter which path it takes, we're setting the contact ID exactly as contact ID. So it'll be able to dynamically pull it from here or pull it from here. So that's exactly what we want to happen. So let's go ahead and test the workflow again. And I expect it to fail right here and come down the false path because the slot doesn't exist anymore. And let's see, we have a bad request. So what went wrong? Check your parameters. The slot you have selected is no longer available. Okay, cool. Actually, what I want to happen is I don't want it to fail and stop the workflow here. So I'm going to go to settings, and then on error, I just want to continue the workflow. So let's go ahead and save and run that again. And there you go. So now it errored. It still gave us that same error, but now it's just going to continue the workflow, hit the if statement and false because the appointment doesn't actually exist anymore. So if I come in here and delete this appointment, and then rerun the workflow, we should see it come over here as successful booking. So let's try that. There you go. It booked the appointment successfully, and we can double check, and there it is. Awesome. Now we have one more thing we need to account for. If the contact ID was existent, right? Let's say, and in this case, in this tutorial, it's already going long. I'm not going to come up with scenarios and show you where the contact ID would exist, but let's just say this wasn't empty and I just put some random, actually, I won't put anything random in there. I'll actually put the contact ID in there so that we can run through a full success case. But I'm going to come over here and fill out the contact ID. You wouldn't really do this because that would make this workflow fixed to that contact ID all the time, but where you would use this contact ID is that if in the webhook the contact ID was passed, then we can drag and drop and use that variable. But let's say the contact ID does exist and I test a workflow, it should come over here, and it did, but we have nothing happening right now. But if you notice, there is a contact ID variable in here. And so if I just drag and drop this all the way to book appointment, skip all this stuff, let me bring this up here, and I actually come into this book appointment, the contact ID should still be available using JSON contact ID because it's named the same contact ID, and it's named the same in here, and it's named the same in here. So that one book appointment can serve all three scenarios. And so if I run this again, it'll actually go down, and I expect it to come down here to unsuccessful booking because the slot doesn't exist. And that's exactly what happened. And now I'm going to delete this. This is monotonous testing, but this is the kind of testing that you want to do before you deploy it in a live environment. This should succeed, and our appointment should have been booked. Perfect. It worked exactly as we expected. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come into this contact ID, and I'm going to delete this because that's not actually how we're going to run this. And let's run this in a live environment. Let me clean this up a little bit. What I want to do is I'm going to unpin this data, okay? I'm going to click on production URL here, and I'm going to copy this. And we're going to come into our VAPI dashboard, go to tools, and we're going to replace our test URL here in the server settings with our production one. Make sure you click save, get open slots, do the same thing, save. And now what I want to do is I'm going to test this live on a phone call to make sure what we have is working. But before that, I need to activate the workflow. Once I activate the workflow, my production URL will actually be up and listening. And if I come over here to executions, I can track every time it's executed. And so I'm going to go ahead and give it a call and try to book an appointment for tomorrow at 2. But before I do that, I'm actually going to delete this contact so that this contact gets recreated and we can test the different scenarios live on the call. So let me give it a second. Cool. Looks like it's deleted. So let's go give it a call.
Hello, how can I help you today?
Hey, my name is Justin, and I'd like to book a call for tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Just a sec. Give me a moment. Your appointment is booked successfully for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Is there anything else I can assist you with?
Yeah, can you actually book another appointment for me for tomorrow at 2 p.m., please?
Actually, you already have an appointment booked for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Would you like to book an additional appointment at a different time?
Cool. I'll see if I could. It's too smart for me. I thought I was going to fool it into trying to book an appointment again. But if you see, what happened was it actually checked the appointment times with the first webhook, and then it actually tried to book the appointment, and it was successful. So that worked exactly as we expected. If I come in here to the book appointment workflow, that it searched for the contact, it didn't find one because we deleted it. It created the contact, and then it booked the appointment. Now the contact exists. And so now I'm going to try to throw it for a loop. And I'm going to say, hey, can I book appointment for tomorrow at 2? It should check open slots and realize 2 is not available. It should warn me of that. But if it doesn't warn me of that, it should actually try to book the appointment and then it'll fail. But I think it's going to warn me of that, and I think it's going to suggest other times. So let's give it a shot.
Hello, how can I help you today?
Hey, my name is Justin, and I'd like to book an appointment for tomorrow at 2.
One moment. It looks like the slot for tomorrow at 2 p.m. is unavailable. However, I can book you for 2:30 p.m. or 3 p.m. if that works for you. Which would you prefer?
Yeah, let's do 2:30 p.m., please.
One moment. Your appointment is booked for tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. Is there anything else I can assist you with?
Nope, that'll be all. Thank you. Awesome. So it worked. And so let's look at what happened differently in this workflow. So if we come over here to get open slots, or this was the get open slots call, it did exactly what we expected it to do. It came over here and it sent us the open slots. If you looked at it, the 2 o'clock was no longer available, but the 2:30 was available. It told us that. Now, if I come in here to the book appointment workflow, this happened a little bit differently because this time the contact ID already existed. We found it. And so it came down here, it searched for contacts, and the contact was found. And then it went ahead and it executed the book appointment workflow. So that's it. So that is a complete and simplified version of the appointment booking. Arguably not simple because it took us an hour and 16 minutes to put together. But I think it was extremely important for me to make this video. One, because VAPI changed their entire interface on us. And I've also learned some lessons since the last video. And so hopefully this simplifies it. This improves performance for your appointment booking if you're using VAPI. I'll make another video like this using retail AI, but I wanted to create this video so that you can see it. And I also wanted to include all the troubleshooting steps that you saw inherent in this video because you're going to end up going through the same thing, and it's incredibly frustrating if you're missing details in the video. So hopefully you appreciate it. If you like this video or if you got value, please comment down below. And remember, if you're not subscribed and you're here this long, I don't know what you're doing. Subscribe. Have a good one. See you on the next one. Peace.